We now want to bring in Jake Zwig. We spoke to him earlier this morning. He's a former Navy SEAL and a combat swimmer. When we started the morning, Jake, we were talking about how the plan was to bring them out, the boys, one by one over many hours. Now it's obviously happening more rapidly, and I'm seeing reports online that they're trying to bring the boys out now, actually, 2 by 2. What does that tell you about this operation?
One, they probably got squeezed for time, but let's be honest, that's what happens when you put the best and the brightest on a problem. You know, they underpromised and they're overperforming.
Absolutely. You know, I asked a friend of mine who's done a lot of diving in some complex situations what would scare him the most in this situation. He said visibility. Cave water's looking muddy. You got zero visibility environment. Even with a guide rope, it's going to freak out a kid and cause panic. Full face mask is very smart, but if the water, because the water's muddy. But then anything that gets a little twisted or hung up is really hard to unravel, and no ability to communicate with that kid or other divers. Talk about what it's like to be in that murky environment. You can't see, the kid can't see. Let's say his foot gets cut or stuck on something. You know, walk us through how you manage a situation like that.
So, I mean, let's just be honest. They've got people staged at all the places that are going to give them problems. They're not just rolling dice that somebody's going to squeeze through that narrow passageway and make it on their own. They probably got guys there to face the contingency, right? They're not just going to let the kid, you know, struggle on his own. So,
the variable there is panic. The variable there is a kid that panics, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he panics, they're little. There's not much they're going to be able to do. They're going to get drug out. So, you know.
But you also think they have not been eating much over the last 2 weeks. Malnutrition. I mean, these boys are small to begin with. Jake, you are a former Navy SEAL. We had you on earlier in the show, and you compared this to climbing Mount Everest. You think about that and the situation they're in, plus the pressure of just not knowing how you're going to get out of this thing, if you're going to get out alive, with these boys who don't even know how to swim. So to climb Mount Everest without doing any training beforehand, as we're watching this footage and seeing these pictures with inside this cave, walk our viewers through what they are experiencing, likely right at this moment, with these boys.
Well, I mean, it's like I said before, you know, there's stages to the climb, but let's be honest, we got 6 out, we got 7 more to go or 6 more to go. You know, getting down off of Mount Everest is just as dangerous as getting up it. So, you know, they're going through right now, they're probably terrified. Either that or they're completely relaxed. One of the two extremes, more than likely, because they're not going to be able to see anything. So it's going to be like being in a dark closet, you know, in the water, not knowing where you're going, not knowing what's happening. They've talked them through it probably 4 or 5 times at this point. They had some practice dives in the cave. You know, they got an understanding kind of what they're going to experience, but they don't know how long it's going to be. The other thing is there's breaks in between where they've got to get out and walk. Yeah. So they're not underwater for that whole time, which is probably a break for them. You know, and after they get done with that first dive and they get to the first bit of air where they get to come up and breathe, I'm sure they're going to, you know, breathe a sigh of relief and be a lot better off.
Yeah, and Jake, we all want to be as optimistic as possible about the future of this operation, but I'm noticing reports online that one of the first boys who emerged, there are concerns about his condition, having been without food at one point for, I believe, 9 days. In more recent days, they have had food, but they were malnourished. And then that was before heading into the water with the divers and emerging after maybe 2.5 miles of a dive and a swim. So there's at least one boy that they're concerned about. They're obviously concerned about the others who are still inside the cave. And there are some reports as well that they may halt operations for the night and start it up again tomorrow, because night has now fallen there in Thailand. Talk about, as awesome as this operation has gone so far, about how we are not out of the woods yet, are we?
Oh, no way. I mean, we got a long ways to go, you know. I mean, the big thing is once they get them out, you know, they may have a decompression ride. I heard they're going to be, you know, some of the places are as deep as 90 feet. It's just going to have to see what happens. I highly doubt we're going to lose anybody after they get out from malnutrition. I mean, a person can go a month without food. So they may be beat down a little bit. They may have a little bit of a hospital ride, you know, a couple days in the hospital. But trust me on this one, getting them out of that cave is 99% of the problem.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So,
well, Jake, we've been showing a couple of graphics this morning. We're going to put another one up on the screen. Not sure if you're going to be able to see it or not, but it illustrates the complexity of a tandem dive like this. We're hearing that it's basically 2 divers for every kid coming out. Ultimately, there's a rope or a dive line that they're holding on to. They've got both tanks, but also compressed air bottles. The child wearing a full face mask to minimize the variables. They're also tethered to the diver. So you're saying likely if they're going through tricky passages, there are other divers at that intersection, to use a familiar term for folks, shepherding the other divers through as well as the child, so that you're, again, minimizing variables of what they could run into. They probably already cleared those areas out even more. Nothing's going to be smooth. But is this a setup where you're tethered to someone else, rescuing someone that is commonly practiced that you're familiar with?
100%, right? Like if you get to a real sticky place, there's going to be a pro there to help you out through that sticky place. That's just part of mission planning, operation planning, right?
Yep.
You want to make sure that at all the places where things can go really wrong, that you got some extra people there to make sure they don't. And in this case, they've got a ton of bodies on the ground, over 1,000 people. So they're not gonna waste anybody that could help out in a situation where they can make the odds of probability of everything going successful, increase.
Jake, you think about these boys and their coach who've been in this cave for 2 weeks now. How important is it to have each other during these times? I mean, if you were left alone in this cave by yourself, I mean, you don't have much food, you don't know what the conditions are, but to rely on each other for moral support, to help each other stick through it, to give each other hope in a time when it seems like you don't know what the future might be or if you're going to make it out, just how important that is to have each other.
Well, I know this. You don't want to play the Wild Boars in about a month from now because they're going to be fired up to win some soccer games now.
I think
that is very true.
Team camaraderie has been established, not to be lightly, but it's a bonding and dangerous experience. We pray for them. Hey, Jake, thanks for your time and your expertise. We appreciate it.